it's that time of year again. Yes, that's right. It's the wonderful month of June, that time of year when the weather gets cold and windy, and every major corporation changes their colour and company scheme to prideful rainbows, as if to say pridefully, although we may find causes to systematically seek to remove your rights and continue your oppression, we still want your money, and we'll continue to sell you stuff for as long as it's profitable. It's Pride, everyone! And what better way to celebrate than to delve into the queerest parts of the Doctor Who canon and lore? And for a show made in the 60s, there's far more of that than you'd think, both behind the camera and on the screen. The very premise of the show appeals to the queer experience, or at least how it existed back then. The Doctor is an outcast from their own society who escapes and finds belonging in a chosen family. A show about fighting for the underdog and standing up to oppression. An optimistic show that embraces diversity, tolerance, and living as your true self. And it's no wonder there's more queer people involved with the production of every era than you can shake a stick at, including Waris Hussein, deputy showrunner and director of the very first episode. There were many gay actors who played many loved characters, although many kept it in their private life because of the culture of the time. We got Max Adrian, who played Priam in The Mythmakers, that wonderful lost story about the city of Troy. We got Malcolm Cashman in Time Flight, and even Matthew Waterhouse, who played Adric. And we can't forget Jonathan Nathan Turner, the man, the myth, the legend, who thought it'd be a good idea to get the Sixth Doctor to do this, and this.
Oh, you at it again, look.
Heck.
Will you stop strangling people?
In those early days of 20th century Doctor Who, queer topics may have been forbidden, but that didn't stop them from shoving it into the subtext. In Season 14's The Mask of the Mandragora, we are blessed with what could be the most homoerotic relationship ever depicted in classic Who, or indeed on the BBC, at least to that date. In the characters Marco and his companion Giuliano, who are in what is obviously a very intimate and underplayed romance. And it's not short of bitchiness, when Giuliano seems pretty smitten with the Doctor at first sight of him, causing Marco to offer snide, jealous put-downs to whatever the Doctor happens to be doing for most of the story. In The Curse of Fenric, according to the writer Ian Briggs, Dr. Judson was inspired partially by Alan Turing, a pioneer of computer science, best known for his work on the Enigma codes in World War II, which he solved by inventing modern computing, and a massive machine named after his childhood crush. They were going to have Judson be gay, and frustrated that he couldn't be gay openly. But because of this lady and this law, they were forced to change it to him being frustrated about a disability. But in the novelisation, they fixed it by making his disability caused by an injury caused by his jilted ex-gay lover. Interestingly enough, the 8th Doctor meets the real Alan Turing in the novel The Turing Test, and in a later novel he claims that him and Turing were more than just friends. Take that as you will. And there's also Ace. She had exhibited romantic attraction to blokes, of course. I mean, there's remembrance of the Daleks, for example, but in the last episode of the classic run, Survival, there was significant lesbian subtext with Ace and the character Kara. And this was actually confirmed by the writer of the episode, Rona Munro. There's a lot of LGBT-coded characters in the classic era, especially in the McCoy era, but none of it is able to escape subtext. That is until New Who, when we are blessed with the one, the only, Captain Jack Harkness. But we're not allowed to say nice things about him. You're probably expecting me to talk about the new show and the queer characters that are in that. I mean, you got your Bill Potts, your Yasmin Khan. Clara was bisexual, but only a really male-gazy kind of way. But we already know about them. Let's talk about characters that you probably don't know about. We interrupt this message to once again shill for Big Finish, the audio production house that has put me personally in financial ruin with their wonderful, wonderful stories. I sold my wife and children to a Balinese businessman and took out a mortgage on my house just to afford these CDs here, and it was totally worth it. These things are addictive, as are the stories they contain. I hadn't touched a CD since 2010 and now I can't stop! Send help! Anyway, they squirt queer representation into everything they do, and it never feels like tokenism. They just feel like normal people in the worlds of the Doctor Who universe. Honestly, if I were to sit down and list every single Doctor Who Big Finish character that wasn't cis-het, this video would be 20 hours long. There are so many of them that not even all of them have names.
We're the thin, fat, gay, married Anglican Marines. Why would we need names as well?
Nah, mate, not like that. They run the gamut of being minor characters, to background characters, to main characters, to the leads of the story. So rather than break my brain by trying to do so, I am just going to list the standouts. Let's start with a gay. Big Finish had a unique opportunity to inject diversity into the classic era. You may say that this is revisionism, and that's because it is. No points for stating the obvious. You're doing very fucking good, sweetie. But this is good revisionism, damn it. In 2011, the first Doctor got a gay male companion from the 60s named Oliver Harper, who joined the TARDIS crew alongside Stephen. He feels as if he's forced to come out of the closet to them in the story Cold Equations, and was so deeply ashamed that he thought that he was going to be yeeted out of the TARDIS just for being gay. But the Doctor reassures him. Now you listen here, my boy. The persecution visited upon you by society is society's crime, not yours. And Stephen tells him that in the future, nobody really cares about that stuff anymore. You could be gay, you could be straight, you could be bi, you could be whatever. When people are going around sleeping with aliens and that's the norm, you tend to not care about that stuff. Then we have the Sixth Doctor, who has a non-binary companion called Calypso Jones. I mean, some would say that they don't really count as a companion, but they did travel in the TARDIS, so I guess they count. Anyway, Calypso Jones is
a mixed-race, pansexual, trans, non-binary person from a future that's coming whether you like it or not. And on top of that, I'm not even entirely human.
Dear Lord.
That's right. I'm everything that scares you in one stylish package.
They're sort of a Han Solo type, a bounty hunter / smuggler from the Wild West that is the asteroid belt. They first showed up in the Lovecraft Invasion, tracking the bounty of a genetically engineered mind parasite that can take over planets by bringing people's innermost fears and nightmares to life. And it's latched on to H.P. Lovecraft, the creator of the Cthulhu mythos, pioneer of existential horror, and world-renowned bigot, xenophobe, and racist. I think you can see how this is a bad thing. Anyway, Jones, alongside companion Constance Clark, a Wren from World War II, they have to babysit Lovecraft while he sits in the corner, spitting out racial slurs and occasionally spitting out monsters, while the Doctor and Flip, another companion from 2010, are projecting themselves in his mind to capture the mind parasite and stop it from spewing out the entire Cthulhu mythos. And while they're at it, they pontificate on how painful it is to discover that someone who created something that you love, that influenced your life in many, many ways, turns out to be a horrible, horrible person.
The most painful scenario in my experience is when you make the discovery about the creator after you've fallen in love with their work. Then it becomes tarnished after the fact.
This came out not long after J.K. Rowling started showing her true turfy colours. If you don't understand what's going on with that, what the big deal is, there's some links in the description. Regardless of your thoughts on the transgender issue, J.K. Rowling is collaborating with people who don't only want to destroy the rights of trans people, but of queer people in general, calling for conversion therapy and genocide of trans individuals.
I tried reading my favourite book of theirs again, just to see if I still could. I loved it so much, you see.
And could you?
No, I couldn't get past the first line.
Calypso Jones also shows up in the end of the beginning, the final story in the monthly plays, where they have a big old crush on Constance Clark, who's completely oblivious to this fact, much to the Doctor's amusement. While they take down a robot gangster named Alzeto, who's essentially a modified forklift. Speaking of trans companions, I would be remiss if I did not mention Tanya Bell, who appears in the 8th Doctor series Stranded, where the Doctor, Liv Chenka, and Helen Leclerc find themselves stranded when the TARDIS crashes in 2020 and is on the brink of death. With no idea if the TARDIS will ever recover, the Doctor takes his companions to his house in Baker Street, only to discover that it's now a set of apartments and he is now the landlord of a colourful bunch of characters, including a gay elderly couple who used to work at UNIT in the 3rd Doctor era, and Tanya Bell. She works for Torchwood, but the Doctor can't know that Torchwood even exists yet, so she constantly has to stick around the issue. PC Andy is also there, and Tanya actually enters a relationship with Liv Chenka, who is a medtech from the future from the planet Keldor, that planet that has these robots. When she asks her out, they have this wonderful coming out scene, where Liv, someone from a different time, a different place, where this sort of stuff doesn't really matter anymore, is completely oblivious that this is usually an issue in the 2020s. It's just wonderful.
I'm transgender.
Right.
I just thought you ought to know.
Oh, is that it? That's all it is?
Yeah, you don't mind?
I've been trying to decide on how to finish this off, and I think I've got something. You see, I'm an Australian, and if there's one thing that Australians love more than a nice cold glass of Tooheys Extra Dry, it's sitting down and having a good old yarn. So to round things off, let's have a good old laugh at the most influential bigot in the history of British television. This is the story of how Mary Whitehouse accidentally caused the first ever gay sci-fi slash pairing. Mary Whitehouse, she was a tough old bird. And by tough, I mean like old leather. She was a mother, a grandmother, a teacher, a conservative social activist, and a world-renowned professional busybody. She was also an anti-sex sex educator.
You didn't actually
I
teach
helped.
it yourself, but
Yes,
you helped.
no.
You
Certainly I taught.
You taught it.
She would sit boys on one side of the room and girls on the other, and then she'd show them diagrams and tell them absolutely nothing that they needed to know. As if sex is something that just magically appears after marriage. She was a fundamentalist Christian to the core, and hated anything gay, new, or fun. In other words, she was an old bird from another era. But the times, they were a-changing. It was the 1960s, a period of great social and societal upheaval. Music was getting better, people were exploring newer and better things to do with their bodies, people were getting new ideas and questioning the old ways. Exciting things were happening. Very naughty things. Young people were hanging loose and being free and doing the sex thing, and this just won't do. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll were popping up in everything. In the paper, the magazines, the radio, the television, full frontal nudity in some cases. And most horrible of all, people were saying dirty words on the television.
Bloody fair, and it bloody marvellous. I'm the Tory, ain't I? I'm the one everybody attacks. I'm the bloody capitalist, and I'm poorer everyone else.
Where would it lead? So concerned by the fun and interesting ways that society was going, Mary Whitehouse had decided that society had gone quite far enough, thank you very much. The children to whom she felt she was responsible were being affected by what they were seeing on the television. And by God, she was going to do something about it. She was going to save the children of England from the evils of fun and entertainment. And she would do it the only way that she knew how. By writing angry letters addressed to the Director General of the BBC, complaining that someone was using the B word. Her mission was to clean up television. Oh yes, it was so much her mission that she started a pressure group called Clean Up TV and became a public figure. And in the following year, she found more bored housewives and formed the National Viewers and Listeners Association and used it as a platform to criticise the BBC for their complete lack of accountability.
We recognise that the period between 6 and 9:15 is a period for family viewing, and we saw a programme that started at 6:35, and it was the dirtiest programme that I have seen for a very long time.
With their use of filthy words and bad language and excessive use of sex, violence and rock and roll in their programmings. Oh, the horror! She even sent telegrams to the Prime Minister over a TV show where a man constantly said the word bloody. The Prime Minister, 10 Downing Street, London. Someone, somewhere, has to take responsibility for standards of BBC programming. Till Death Us Do Part at 7:30 this evening was dirty, blasphemous, and full of bad language. Will you take whatever action seems necessary? Sincerely, Mary Whitehouse. I'm sure the Prime Minister of Great Britain was very concerned. She singled out Doctor Who more than a couple of times. The show only really met her ire during the Hinchcliffe era. But one of her suggestions to the BBC was that opposite-sex characters should never touch. So the Doctor should never touch his female companions, lest the viewing audience got the impression that there was hanky-panky going on in the TARDIS. And it's here in the story that we find our intrepid heroes. For you see, in 1966, Fraser Hines joined the show as Jamie McCrimmon in the episode The Highlanders, which is sadly lost to the file-based storage system that the BBC operated at the time. He wasn't initially going to be a companion, but people liked him so much that he was almost immediately added to the show. They got midway through filming the last episode of the serial, and they had even filmed a goodbye scene where Jamie watched as the TARDIS disappeared. Fraser Hines and Patrick Troughton were best mates. They had worked together before, and their relationship bled into their performance, and Patrick Troughton was determined to stick to the no touching the female companions rule. If they didn't want him touching Zoe or Polly, that was fine and he wouldn't. They didn't say anything about Jamie though. Mostly to amuse themselves, they decided to play their parts as if they were a couple. They would constantly grab hold of each other, enter a scene together, hurriedly buttoning up their shirts to give the impression that they had just got done fucking. And this was not lost on the viewing public, especially not the gay viewers in the audience. And gay and bisexual viewers, starved for representation in the general media of the time, did what they did best. They read into it and started writing slash fiction. So much slash fiction. Oh my giddy aunt. The second Doctor and Jamie had become the original sci-fi gay slash pairing, and it was all thanks to one woman. God bless you, you withered old bat. In this video, I think I made it kind of clear that the queer saturation of this franchise is pretty damn obvious. This hasn't been a show that's been infested by the LGBT agenda and woke culture. It's been there right from the very start. And many queer fans who saw it as kids eventually grew up to contribute to the show. You got your RTD, you got your Jason Hay Gallery, who contributed to the beginning of Big Finish, even the most recent people to join the show, like Yasmin Finney, watched The 10th Doctor as a kid. The show has involved people of the LGBTI community right from the very start, so stop bitching about woke culture every time they cast one of them. You sound like complete and utter idiots. And as a very stupid man once said,
you can't put the soy milk back into the titty.